Hi guys, welcome to Relationship Stories with TaleTime. The first one is titled, Mom Stole $50,000 from me to fund my golden child sister's wedding. I froze the account and got her arrested on the wedding day. The story starts like this. Growing up, I always knew that I was the black sheep of the family. My sister, Emily, was the golden child who could do no wrong in the eyes of our mother. From a young age, it was clear that Emily was the favorite, receiving the lion's share of attention, praise, and resources. I, on the other hand, was constantly compared to my sister and found wanting. No matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to measure up to Emily in my mother's eyes. This created a deep-seated resentment between my sister and me, as well as a strained relationship with my mother. As we grew older, the differences in treatment only became more apparent. While Emily's every whim was catered to, I was left to fend for myself. My mother would often dismiss my accomplishments and focus solely on Emily's successes, no matter how minor they might be. Despite the emotional distance between us, my mother insisted on maintaining a joint bank account with me. She claimed it was for emergencies and that it would help me learn financial responsibility. I reluctantly agreed, believing that it could be a way to build trust and improve our relationship. I worked hard to contribute to this account, saving diligently from my part-time job while completing my studies. Over the years, I managed to accumulate a substantial sum of $50,000, which I earmarked for my future goals and aspirations. Meanwhile, Emily was busy planning her extravagant dream wedding. She had always been the type to demand the best of everything, and her wedding was no exception. My mother was thrilled to be involved in the planning process, and the two of them would spend hours discussing every detail, from the designer dress to the lavish reception. I, however, was left on the sidelines, my opinions and input rarely sought or valued. It was clear that my mother's primary focus was on making Emily's wedding perfect, no matter the cost. Little did I know that the cost would be far greater than I ever imagined, and that the joint account I had worked so hard to build would become the center of a shocking betrayal that would tear our family apart. It was a routine Tuesday morning when I decided to check the balance of our joint account. I had been saving diligently for the past few years and was excited to see how much closer I was to my financial goals. However, as I logged into the online banking portal, my heart sank. The account balance was significantly lower than it should have been, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. With trembling hands, I navigated through the transaction history, my eyes widening with each scroll. There, in stark black and white, were numerous large withdrawals that I had not authorized. The transactions dated back several months and totaled an astounding $50,000. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized that my hard-earned savings had been drained from the account. Panic and confusion gave way to a simmering anger as I tried to make sense of the situation. Who could have accessed the account and withdrawn such a substantial amount of money? The answer came to me in a sickening flash of clarity: my mother. I immediately reached for my phone and dialed her number, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. When she answered, I wasted no time in confronting her about the missing money. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Why is there $50,000 missing from our joint account?" At first, my mother feigned ignorance. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone irritatingly calm. "I'm sure it's just a mistake. The bank must have made an error." But I knew better. I had seen the transactions with my own eyes, and I knew that no bank error could account for such a systematic draining of funds. I pressed further, my anger rising with each evasive response from my mother. "Don't lie to me, Mom," I snapped. "I can see the withdrawals. You've been taking money out of the account for months. How could you do this to me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When my mother finally spoke, her voice had taken on a dismissive, almost condescending tone. "Oh, that," she said with a sigh. "I needed the money for your sister's wedding. You know how important this is to her, and we couldn't let her special day be anything less than perfect." I was stunned. My mother had stolen $50,000 from me, and she was acting as if it were no big deal. As if I should have been happy to hand over my hard-earned savings for my sister's extravagant wedding. "Are you serious?" I sputtered, my voice rising in pitch. "You took my money without even asking me? Without even telling me? How could you think that was okay?" My mother's response was infuriatingly casual. "Don't be so dramatic," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's just money, and it's for a good cause. Your sister deserves the wedding of her dreams, and as her family, it's our job to make that happen." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother was actually trying to justify stealing from me, gaslighting me into believing that I was overreacting. She had always favored my sister, but this was a new low. "This is unacceptable, Mom," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You had no right to take that money. I earned it, and I had plans for it. You can't just steal from me and expect me to be okay with it. But my mother remained unmoved. I don't have time for this, she said dismissively. I have a wedding to plan. We'll talk about this later. And with that, she hung up, leaving me stunned and seething with rage. I knew that I couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. I had to find out exactly what had happened and hold my mother accountable for her actions. Reeling from the shock of my mother's dismissive attitude, I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let her get away with stealing my hard-earned money, no matter how much she tried to justify it. The first step was to gather concrete evidence of the theft. I began by contacting the bank and requesting detailed transaction records for the joint account. I explained the situation to the bank representative, emphasizing that I had not authorized any of the large withdrawals. The representative was sympathetic and assured me that they would provide the necessary documentation. While waiting for the bank to process my request, I combed through my own financial records, looking for any clues or discrepancies. I cross-referenced the dates and amounts of the unauthorized withdrawals with my own spending habits, confirming that I had no knowledge of the transactions. As the days passed, my frustration and sense of betrayal only grew. How could my own mother, someone who was supposed to love and support me, steal from me so callously? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was just the latest in a long line of favoritism and mistreatment. When the bank finally provided the transaction records, I pored over them with a fine-toothed comb. The evidence was undeniable. The withdrawals had been made at various ATMs and through online transfers, all leading back to my mother's personal account. Armed with this information, I reached out to my mother once again, hoping that confronting her with hard evidence would force her to take responsibility for her actions. However, my hopes were quickly dashed. I already told you, I needed that money for your sister's wedding, she snapped, her tone dismissive and unapologetic. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's not like you were doing anything important with the money anyway. Her words cut deep, revealing the true extent of her disregard for my feelings and aspirations. In her eyes, my dreams and goals were trivial compared to my sister's lavish wedding. I tried to reason with her, to make her see how much her actions had hurt me. Mom, this isn't about the money itself, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. It's about the fact that you betrayed my trust. You stole from me, lied to me, and then acted like it was no big deal. How can I ever trust you again? But my mother remained unmoved. You're being ridiculous, she scoffed. I'm your mother, and I know what's best for this family. Your sister's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and we all have to make sacrifices to ensure it's perfect. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother was actually trying to paint herself as the victim, as if stealing from me was some noble sacrifice she had made for the family. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and anger wash over me. My own mother, the person who was supposed to love and protect me, had violated my trust in the most egregious way possible. I knew then that I couldn't let this injustice stand. I had to take action, not just for myself, but for the principle of the matter. I refused to be a doormat, to let my mother and sister trample over me in their quest for the perfect wedding. With a heavy heart and a determination I had never known before, I began to plan my next move. I would confront my mother and sister, armed with the evidence of their betrayal, and I would make them face the consequences of their actions. With the transaction records in hand and a steely resolve, I arranged a meeting with my mother and sister. I knew that confronting them together would be the most effective way to expose their betrayal and demand accountability. We met at my mother's house, the same place where countless family gatherings had been held over the years. The atmosphere was tense as I sat across from them, my mother's face a mask of impatience and my sister's a picture of smug indifference. I wasted no time in laying out the evidence before them. I have proof that you stole $50,000 from my account, I said, my voice trembling with anger. I have the transaction records right here, showing the withdrawals you made without my knowledge or consent. My mother's expression remained unchanged, a look of bored annoyance on her face. I already told you, I needed that money for your sister's wedding, she said, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. I don't know why you're still harping on about this. My sister chimed in, her tone dripping with condescension. Yeah, seriously, get over it already. It's not like you were saving up for anything important. My wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and we needed that money to make it perfect. I was stunned by their callous disregard for my feelings and financial well-being. How could they sit there and defend their actions, as if stealing from me was their God-given right? Do you even hear yourselves? I demanded, my voice rising in pitch. You stole from me, lied to me, and now you have the audacity to act like it's no big deal? What gives you the right to take my hard-earned money without even asking me? My mother's eyes narrowed, her tone taking on a sharp edge. We're family, she snapped. What's yours is ours, and what's ours is yours. That's how it's always been, and that's how it always will be. I don't know why you're being so selfish about this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was accusing me of selfishness for wanting to keep my own money, for wanting to have a say in how it was spent. Selfish? I repeated incredulously. I'm selfish for not wanting my money to be stolen from me? For wanting to have control over my own finances? Are you even listening to yourself? My sister rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with disdain. Oh, please. Like you were ever going to do anything worthwhile with that money anyway. I need it for my wedding, and that's all that matters. You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you're still single and pathetic. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I had always known that my sister looked down on me, but to hear her say it so bluntly, so cruelly, was a new level of hurt. I can't believe you, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I can't believe that you would steal from me, lie to me, and then have the nerve to insult me on top of it all. What kind of family does that to each other? My mother's face hardened, her eyes cold and unyielding. The kind of family that knows what's important, she said firmly. And right now, what's important is your sister's wedding. If you can't see that, then maybe you don't deserve to be a part of this family at all. Her words cut deep, revealing the true depth of her favoritism and disregard for my feelings. In that moment, I realized that I had never truly been a part of this family, not in the way that mattered. I had always been an afterthought, a second-class citizen in my own home. You know what? Maybe you're right, I said, my voice low and steady. Maybe I don't deserve to be a part of this family. But if this is what being a part of this family means, being lied to, stolen from, and treated like dirt, then I don't want any part of it. I stood up, gathering the transaction records and shoving them into my bag. I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I'm done with both of you. I'm done being your doormat, your piggy bank, your punching bag. I deserve better than this, and I'm going to make sure I get it. And with that, I turned and walked out of the house, my heart heavy with betrayal but my resolve stronger than ever. I knew that I had a long road ahead of me, but I also knew that I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. As I left my mother's house, my mind was reeling with the enormity of what had just happened. I had always known that my family was dysfunctional, but the callous way in which they had dismissed my feelings and justified their theft was a new level of betrayal. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with it. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let my mother and sister steal my money and my dreams without consequence. But I also knew that I couldn't do it alone. The first thing I did was contact the bank and request that they freeze the joint account. I explained the situation, providing them with the transaction records and the evidence of the unauthorized withdrawals. The bank representative was sympathetic and assured me that they would take immediate action to prevent any further theft. Next, I sought out the advice of a lawyer. I knew that I needed someone with expertise in financial crimes and family law to help me navigate the legal system and protect my rights. The lawyer listened carefully to my story, asking questions and taking notes as I laid out the details of the theft and the confrontation with my mother and sister. You have a strong case, the lawyer said, after reviewing the evidence. What your mother and sister did was not only a violation of your trust, but a criminal act. We can file a police report and pursue legal action against them. The idea of taking legal action against my own family was daunting, but I knew that it was the only way to hold them accountable for their actions. With the lawyer's guidance, I began to gather additional evidence, including text messages and emails in which my mother and sister discussed the wedding expenses and the use of my money. As the wedding day approached, I knew that I had to confront them one last time. I couldn't let them walk down the aisle, basking in the glow of their ill-gotten gains, without exposing the truth of what they had done. I worked with my lawyer to draft a formal demand letter, outlining the evidence of the theft and the legal consequences they would face if they did not return the money immediately. I planned to hand-deliver the letter on the morning of the wedding, in front of all their guests and loved ones. I also contacted the wedding venue and the vendors, informing them of the situation and asking them to be prepared for a potential disruption. I knew that my mother and sister would be furious, but I also knew that I had the law on my side. As the wedding day approached, I felt a sense of calm determination settle over me. I had done everything in my power to hold my mother and sister accountable for their actions, and I was ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. I knew that the confrontation would be ugly, that my mother and sister would lash out and try to paint me as the villain. But I also knew that I had the truth on my side, and that I was fighting for something bigger than just myself. I was fighting for justice, for the right to be treated with respect and dignity by my own family. I was fighting for the chance to build a life on my own terms, free from the manipulation and abuse that had defined my childhood. And as I walked into the wedding venue, the demand letter clutched tightly in my hand, I knew that I was ready to take my stand, no matter what the cost. The day of my sister's wedding arrived, and the air was thick with tension as I made my way to the venue. The sun was shining brightly, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I had the demand letter in my hand, the evidence of my mother and sister's betrayal weighing heavily in my pocket. As I walked into the venue, I was struck by the opulence of the decorations. No expense had been spared, from the lavish floral arrangements to the crystal chandeliers that hung from the ceiling. It was a bitter reminder of the money that had been stolen from me, the hard-earned savings that had been used to fund this extravagant display. I made my way to the bridal suite, where I knew my mother and sister would be getting ready. I could hear their laughter and excited chatter as I approached, and it made my stomach turn. How could they be so carefree, so oblivious to the pain they had caused me? I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When my sister opened it, her face flushed with excitement. I could see the moment she registered my presence. Her smile faltered, and a look of confusion and annoyance crossed her features. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight with irritation. "I told you I didn't want you at my wedding." I pushed past her, stepping into the room where my mother was sitting at a vanity, applying her makeup. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "I'm here to give you one last chance," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "One last chance to make this right, to return the money you stole from me and apologize for what you've done." My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes in disdain. "We've been over this," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The money was for your sister's wedding, and that's all there is to it. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a ceremony to prepare for." She turned back to the mirror, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. But I wasn't going to be dismissed so easily. Not this time. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You don't get to just brush this off, not anymore. I have evidence of what you did, of the money you stole from me. And I'm not leaving until you face the consequences of your actions." I held up the demand letter, watching as my mother and sister's faces paled with shock and anger. My sister snatched the letter from my hand, her eyes scanning the contents with growing disbelief. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "You can't do this, not today of all days. This is my wedding day, and I won't let you ruin it with your petty accusations." But I stood my ground, my resolve unwavering. "It's not an accusation," I said, my voice steady and calm. "It's the truth. And if you won't face it willingly, then I'll make sure the law does it for you." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to reveal two police officers, their faces grim with determination. My mother and sister's eyes widened with shock and fear as they realized the gravity of the situation. "What is this?" my mother demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "What have you done?" I looked her in the eye, my gaze unflinching. "I've done what I had to do," I said, my voice filled with a quiet strength. "I've done what you should have done from the beginning. I've stood up for what's right, for what's just." The officers stepped into the room, their presence filling the space with an air of authority. They approached my mother, their expressions serious and professional. "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest," one of the officers said, his voice calm but firm. "You're being charged with theft and financial fraud. We're going to need you to come with us." My mother's face drained of color, her mouth falling open in shock. She looked to my sister, who was staring at the officers in disbelief, her carefully applied makeup smudged with tears. "This can't be happening," my sister whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "This is my wedding day. This can't be real." But it was real. It was the consequence of their actions, the price they had to pay for their greed and betrayal. As the officers handcuffed my mother and led her out of the room, the chaos of the moment erupted around us. Guests were whispering and staring, their faces a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. The wedding planner was frantically trying to manage the situation, her voice rising in pitch as she barked orders at the staff. And through it all, I stood there, watching as the truth of what my family had done was finally exposed for all to see. It was a bittersweet moment, a victory that had come at a great personal cost. But as I watched my mother being led away, her head bowed in shame, I knew that I had done the right thing. I had fought for my own worth, for my own dignity, and I had won. In the weeks that followed my mother's arrest, the full extent of the legal consequences began to unfold. The police investigation revealed a pattern of financial abuse and embezzlement that went beyond just my own case. My mother had been stealing from other family members and even from her own business for years, all to maintain the illusion of wealth and success. She was charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. My sister, who had been complicit in the theft of my money, was also facing legal repercussions, though to a lesser extent. The once perfect facade of our family had been shattered, and the truth of who they really were was laid bare for all to see. The fallout within our family was immense. My father, who had been largely absent throughout my childhood, was forced to confront the reality of what his wife and daughter had done. He was devastated, both by the betrayal and by the public humiliation of it all. My sister, who had always been the golden child, was suddenly facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life. For me, the feelings of betrayal and anger were overwhelming at times. I had always known that my family was dysfunctional, but the depth of their selfishness and greed was staggering. They had stolen from me, lied to me, and manipulated me for years, all while pretending to be a loving and supportive family. The impact on my relationships was profound. I found myself questioning everything I had ever known about my family, about the people I had trusted and loved. I felt like a fool for not seeing the truth sooner, for allowing myself to be used and abused for so long. But in the midst of all the pain and chaos, I also found a new sense of strength and purpose. I had stood up for myself, for my own worth and dignity, and I had won. I had proven to myself that I was capable of fighting back, of demanding respect and accountability from those who had wronged me. As the legal proceedings continued and the dust began to settle, I knew that I had a long road ahead of me. I had to rebuild my life, my sense of self, and my relationships from the ground up. But I also knew that I was ready for the challenge. I made a commitment to myself, to prioritize my own well-being and happiness above all else. I sought out therapy and support groups, surrounding myself with people who understood what I had been through and could help me heal. I focused on my career, on building a life that was truly my own, free from the manipulation and abuse of my past. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the pain and anger threatened to overwhelm me. But I kept pushing forward, one day at a time, knowing that I was stronger than my circumstances and that I deserved better than what my family had given me. As the months passed and the legal proceedings reached their conclusion, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. My mother was found guilty of multiple counts of theft and fraud, and was sentenced to several years in prison. My sister, while not facing jail time, was ordered to pay restitution and perform community service for her role in the theft of my money. With the truth finally exposed and justice served, I felt a sense of closure and relief. I had faced my greatest fears and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a life that was truly my own. I continued to focus on my own healing and growth, attending therapy sessions and surrounding myself with a supportive network of friends and colleagues. I poured my energy into my career, taking on new challenges and responsibilities that pushed me out of my comfort zone and helped me discover strengths I never knew I had. As time passed, I found myself thriving in ways I never thought possible. I was happier, more confident, and more at peace with myself than I had ever been. I had learned to trust my own instincts, to stand up for myself and my beliefs, and to never let anyone else dictate my worth or my future. Wow guys, this story is absolutely wild. I can't even imagine going through something like this with my own family. The betrayal and the lies are just mind-blowing. But I have to say, I'm seriously impressed with how the main character handled everything. They didn't back down or let their family get away with their crap. They fought back and got justice, even though it must have been insanely tough to go up against their own mother and sister like that. Seriously, mad props to them for being so strong and standing up for themselves. This is the kind of story that just makes you realize how important it is to trust your gut and not let anyone take advantage of you, no matter who they are. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you cannot get enough of my content, please subscribe to my channel, like the video and post a comment to support me. I will see you again tomorrow.